right, now hopefully you've had time to review the information that we covered in Lesson 1, and we're going to move forward now into talking about the framework. And when we talk about the framework, we're going to talk about all the pieces that come together to provide the structure for project management. Again, we're not really covering a specific methodology, but we are talking about how to build the structure to support project management. So here, of course, the PMBOK provides an excellent guidance, and we're going to be addressing the processes that are part of project management. Again, this is a best practice. This is not written in stone. It's not an absolute. And it provides us with a guidance, but that doesn't mean that we can't vary from the path. So when we talk about the framework, I sort of think about this as a matrix, if you will. I think about the 10 knowledge areas, perhaps in rows, maybe if you can envision an Excel spreadsheet, and the 5 process groups and columns across the top, and where your columns and your row intersect, that's where your processes are. And hopefully this will make a little bit more sense as we move forward and take a look. So the heart and soul of the PMBOK guide, absolutely. The processes, the process groups, and the knowledge areas. And as a matter of fact, in the PMBOK is arranged based on knowledge area. And when we talk about knowledge areas, we're talking about those categories of specialty, perhaps, that a project manager should bring. For instance, a special understanding of cost or of quality, procurements, and so on. So these are the areas of knowledge that a project manager should have. The process groups are the categories of information, or the categories of processes. Let's go ahead and move on, and hopefully this will make a little bit more sense. Now I'll tell you an excellent reference, page 61. And you'll see table 3-1 for a matrix of the process groups and knowledge areas. So let's go ahead and get the PMBOK out if you don't already have it. And I would like to direct your attention to page 61. And this is a matrix you will want to keep available. As a matter of fact, my recommendation to you would be, while you're studying, to maybe make a copy of this, a photocopy, and keep this beside you. Because as you can see, when you look at this, just like I described, the knowledge areas down the left side, represented in rows, the process groups across the top, and then the processes intersect in the middle. So again, this is in the PMBOK, page 61, table 3-1. All right, so let's talk about the knowledge areas briefly. And as I mentioned, the PMBOK is arranged based on knowledge areas, and these are categories of expertise, again. Now, most of them should be intuitive. Scope, we talk about just a quick, easy definition for scope would be the work that has to be done as a result of the need to meet the customer requirements. So all the things about developing the scope, figuring out what the scope is, how to create my scope-related documents, that's all in the knowledge area for scope. When we talk about the schedule, we would be in time. The budget would be in cost. And there's our triple constraint, if you'll recall from the previous slide or the previous section, scope, time, and cost. And then if you'll remember, in the center of that triple constraint was quality. So these are all very, very essential knowledge areas. But again, as a project manager, I have many hats that I have to wear. So we have a knowledge area on HR, dealing with our people, whether these are folks that we have had to bargain for, perhaps in a functional environment where we've had to negotiate our staff, or whether they're part of our constant project team, how we pull them together, how we train them. We have communications management, about distributing information, keeping our stakeholders involved. Risk management, of course, risk is an essential element of every project, and we really have to understand the nature of those risks and be prepared. But we also keep in mind that risks can be positive as well. So how can we maximize the positive and lessen the opportunities or lessen the threats involved? Procurement management. This knowledge area used to be called contract management, but then PMI has extended that to procurement management because it's much bigger than just a single contract, of course. So with procurement management, how are we going to deal with our vendors what work are we going to outsource, and how are we going to manage that process. And then last, as I mentioned earlier, this is a new knowledge group for PMBOK 5, and that's stakeholder management. So each of these represent a particular skill set, a particular area of expertise that we would want our project managers to have, and a particular focus. Now, not to be confused with the process groups that go across the top of the chart, and again, you can refer back to page 61. So we have 5 process groups: initiation, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, and closing. And you can see the breakdown of the testable pieces. So you can see the vast majority of your exam comes from planning, executing, monitoring, and controlling. The largest being executing, that's performing the work of the project. So obviously that's very, very important. And it's interesting because executing only has 8 processes, and those 8 processes are worth 30% of your score. So that's definitely an area you want to focus on. All right, now with the process groups, you want to be careful not to refer to them as phases of project management or of the project management, the phases of the project. And the reason for that is that when we use the word phase, it implies that there is a start and a finish to the phase. But when we look at the process groups, they're very, very much iterative in nature. Okay, so we'll start with the initiating processes, but then, if you'll recall from earlier, plan, do, check, act, that comes together in planning, executing, monitoring, and controlling, and these processes often happen in a revolving nature. So we've kind of got the plan, do, check, act in the middle, and then closing. So the idea is we don't stop planning. It's not like we initiate, then we plan, now we're done planning, now we execute, then we monitor. These are happening simultaneously. Also, you want to be sure that you understand the idea that these process groups often happen multiple times per project. As a matter of fact, each phase might go through a particular set of process groups. There again is the reference to the plan, do, check, act, which is exactly what we just looked at. So here's your example on slide 53. Phase 1. Design, 2, develop. So this is a project broken down into phases, and you can see at each particular phase, over on the left in the dark dialog box, if you will, you can see that each phase goes through the process groups. So the process groups are definitely not a one-time focus. We'll continue to go through initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, and closing many times throughout the project. Okay, and our time will be spent, often we spend a lot of time up front planning, and then towards the end of the project we can sort of taper off, certainly as a project manager. And this is just a little illustration that kind of shows the overlapping nature and the level of interaction between the processes.